Hello and welcome. My name is Landon Derentz, and I'm the Senior Director of the Atlantic Council Global Energy Center. The Global Energy Center aims to showcase thought leaders across the energy sector by highlighting the key themes leaders believe are the most important for this year's discussions and exploring the outcomes that leaders hope to see gain momentum coming out of Egypt. That's why it's my privilege today to welcome Roger Martella, the Chief Sustainability Officer of General Electric, for a feature interview as part of the Atlantic Council Global Energy Center's Ambitions for All COP27 content series. As CSO for General Electric, Roger is responsible for leading a comprehensive and cohesive approach to sustainability for GE as it relates to current issues and emerging trends in environmental, social, and governance space. Roger comes to us with a distinguished career in both the private and public sectors as a lawyer and executive, having co-led Sidley Austin's global environmental law and climate change practice, and having served as general counsel for the Environmental Protection Agency. Roger, it's great to have you with us today.
Landon, it's great to see you, and thank you for the honor of inviting me to be part of this great discussion sponsored by the Atlantic Council.
Really starting, I want to ask, how can we ensure a just transition and decarbonize the energy sector while ensuring access to secure, affordable, and reliable, sustainable energy for everyone, and particularly, thinking about the emerging economies around the world?
Landon, thanks very much. And I think that's ultimately the most important question, right? That's why we're here. That's why we're all getting on planes to go have these conversations. And if we break it down, you're highlighting two goals that we want to achieve at the same time. We want to decarbonize the energy sector to address climate change. And I think that's the given. Lots of focus on the energy sector and kind of the energy sector being in the lead when it comes to decarbonization. But the other part of your question is just as important. At the same time, we want to grow access for the 750 million people who don't have access to affordable, reliable, sustainable electricity today. And we want to do both of these things simultaneously. We believe so passionately we have to do these together. This is our purpose. This is our mission, to decarbonize the energy sector while we're growing access. And GE is in a really unique position, I think, and we carry a unique passion about this. GE is a 130-year-old company founded by Thomas Edison, and it's changed many, many times, but there's always been one theme, that we've used innovation and technology to lift up the quality of life for people everywhere. And so when we think about this important role with the energy transition, today we help power 1/3 of the world's energy in 140 countries. And our focus is on using innovation and technology to both decarbonize and increase access, to use the best mix of technology today while innovating for the breakthrough technologies of tomorrow. And today that looks like a combination of renewable energy. I think that's a given. We want to grow renewables as quickly as we can. We have innovative turbines like the Haliade-X, the largest turbine built. It's the role of gas turbine, hydrogen-ready gas turbines that are capable of carbon capture sequestration to provide that resilient that resilient power infrastructure that countries need to have that reliable energy. And it's also a combination of upgrading the grid with both physical and digital tools to make it more resilient from weather events, from cybersecurity, from growing demand, from the variability that renewables introduces. So we want to help countries, particularly in emerging economies, achieve these goals by focusing on bespoke solutions for each country. There's no one-size-fits-all approach here. If we look at the work we've done in Nigeria, in Egypt, in South Africa, in Vietnam, Turkey, and India, everything looks different. It's all tailored to those countries. But what they have in common is they have the same tools in the toolbox. The implementation might be different, but it's the same tools of a combination of renewable energy, gas, and grid. So we take this challenge really seriously, but it's what drives us to be motivated, this notion of both decarbonizing energy, but improving access at the same time to that 750 million people in the world who lack access today.
That's really a great perspective, and honing in on this idea of GE being an innovator about technology. I'm really curious, as we're talking about decarbonizing gas turbines with hydrogen and CCUS, advanced nuclear, SAF, and sustainable aviation fuels. What energy trends are you watching for closely to feed into this policy process, or your industry process?
Well, so this answer is a little different today than it would have been 6 months ago, but the reality is the biggest energy trend we're seeing right here and now, as we head into COP27, is actually what's happening in the United States, the implementation of the United States Inflation Reduction Act. And while I'm talking about a US law, and I'm sensitive that our focus is so global, I think it's important here, though, that what's happening in the US is so game-changing. I'm confident it's going to have broad consequences globally. So I want to maybe both share some perspective on why we think this is so important, and then how I think this has really positive ramifications for Egypt and emerging economies at the same time. So the U.S. Inflation Reduction Act, which is a very odd name for a climate change law, is the first climate change law in the United States. We've talked about climate change a lot in the U.S., but this is the first time come August that we've actually passed a law. And it's unique in a couple of ways. It's a carrots approach in that it really puts the responsibilities on incentivizing companies to both grow clean energy, the clean energy infrastructure, but also invest in the breakthrough technologies that you mentioned of hydrogen and small modular reactors and carbon capture sequestration. So it puts companies kind of in the driver's seat to make these investments. And it's a very much an all of the above technology neutral approach. It's going to be a significant driver of renewables in the near term. We're already off to a quick start. But I think the more interesting part is where this goes to your question on the breakthroughs and how does it help incentivize them. So a lot of these themes, when we meet in Egypt, when we meet with emerging economies, they like these ideas. They like carrots approaches. They like the partnership with industry. They like the notion of technology neutrality and all of the above and investing in breakthroughs. So these themes resonate very well, I think, in other parts of the world. But to some of your questions, if we look at hydrogen, there's huge incentives in here for hydrogen, and we've made some progress there. Our current fleet is capable of 50% hydrogen already. We've run more than 100 turbines for more than 8 million hours on hydrogen. So when we sell a gas turbine today, we think of the pathway for that turbine to be decarbonized in the future through hydrogen, pre-combustion, and of course, carbon capture and sequestration. And carbon capture is another big part of the Inflation Reduction Act, the incentives to capture carbon. We have existing pipelines in the US. There's $12 billion funding passed in an infrastructure act. And we're working globally with partners on both hydrogen and carbon capture to make sure that not just the US is benefiting from this, but that we're investing in emerging economies so that they can be part of these breakthroughs and the solutions too. You mentioned advanced nuclear. This is really, I think, such a great development to see the growth of small modular reactors with initial deployment on the BWRX, GE's product here in Canada as soon as 2028, Poland in the early 2030s. So once again, a lot of innovation in the US, but being expanded globally with partners around the world. And then with sustainable aviation fuel, you've mentioned that as well. This is the opportunity to reduce fuel life cycle carbon emissions by up to 80%. Our engines that have already run, we've had 400,000 commercial flights using some blend of sustainable aviation fuel since 2011. And we've also had the first passenger flight with 100% drop in sustainable aviation fuel on one engine. So huge opportunities here. So that's the US and that's the law. But as I said, we're not just thinking of it as US opportunities. It's great for the US, but we think very quickly, what are the global ramifications as we head into COP27? And one is, as the US creates more incentives to develop these breakthrough technologies, we want to see emerging markets like Egypt invested with us. We want to give emerging markets the opportunity to be invested in these emerging breakthrough technologies and be part of this pipeline. So we have some things we're doing in Egypt at COP27 that's going to give them a real stake in terms of having a role to play in the breakthrough technologies. And we also think that this is precedent for other nations. I don't know that there's going to be a tax credit approach like this, but the notion of, all of the above and a carrots approach as we talk about global climate finance, can we look to the IRA as a template for the right types of technologies to be investing in, combine the climate finance approach with all the interest that countries like Egypt have in being part of the solution here, and merge those things together. So I think that's going to be a big theme at COP27. So when we talk about the IRA, we're not just talking about the US, we're trying to talk about how can we learn from that and help accelerate other nations in being part of these solutions as well.
Well, speaking of other nations, obviously, the host country has a lot of responsibility here. And, it's really important, an important moment for Egypt overall. Where do you see potential for Egypt to lead into this energy transition?
Look, we've been so proud to see Egypt setting such an example of leadership in succeeding with the energy transition, both for Egypt, for the African continent, and for emerging economies generally. We've been so enthusiastic about Egypt's role and how they've taken so much leadership, and really excited about the next couple of weeks. They pursued, I think, what's really important, a very pragmatic approach to decarbonizing energy, but also making sure at the same time they're growing access for those in Egypt who are underserved with reliable, sustainable, and affordable electricity. And what they've done is very similar to what I described earlier. They've built a very diverse mix of energy today to both promote decarbonization and resiliency while being invested in the breakthroughs of technologies. So if you look at renewables, they really have an abundance of renewable energy resources with very high deployment, including hydropower, wind, solar, and biomass. The technology is getting so much better. It's improving so much over the last decade. And we've been really proud to work with them on some of the interconnectivity of the renewables and the grid, with the Batter substation, connecting that to the national grid. It dispatches 1.5 gigawatts of electricity and has a really strategic role in Egypt and the Saudi Arabia interconnection, linking the national grids of both countries and helping deliver electricity to over 1 million homes. So while you want to grow renewables, you have to think about how do you integrate it. And so our role there has been really focused on the integration, which we're very proud of. And we agree with Egypt that renewables cannot solve this alone in the short term. Gas turbines have a really important role to play in the near term. We support up to 35% of the nation's gas turbine fleet. So it's really, I think Egypt represents the best of what we're trying to do, a mix of current and future technologies, a diversity of power generation solutions, and how they can lead Africa and emerging economies in meeting the goals of the global energy transition.
You know, COP27 has been dubbed this implementation COP. And I think I like the word of implementation because it's really invoking progress, right? And so, you know, yes, we have an event. It's going to be an important event. But you know, we want to carry this momentum onto into the future. And so my final question for you is, you know, why is it an important platform to continue the global community, you know, the global community's work on climate change? How do we use this COP process and move it forward into the coming energy transition overall?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. We love the implementation event concept. You know, time for action, right? We're all on board with action. Talking is good. Lots more talking to do, but we're ready to act. And I think our hydrogen demo project is a good example of that. And look, the COP process has really changed. I think it's emerged. Obviously, there's a lot of important discussions going on, and I won't take anything away from that. But it's really emerged as the foremost opportunity to bring diverse stakeholders together. I was at Paris in 2016. You talked a little bit about my background. I was a law firm at the time. I showed up and I was asked to come and give a speech on something involving companies, and people, I was an afterthought, frankly. People were like, who are you and why are you here? And I was happy to be there. It was all very interesting to me, left an impression. But I think it shows 2016 versus last year in Glasgow, when companies were really embraced to kind of come into the room and listen at least. And we were proud to be part of that. We listened, we contributed a little bit, but we were there to listen primarily. Now, if you look at this year, 2027, companies are just fully engaged. They are at the table. They're welcomed into the room. There's this theme of partnership across NGOs, governments, companies on rolling up our sleeves and doing this together. Such a dramatic change. I'm really excited about where we go from here with COP28. Our theme, they're calling an implementation. Our theme is proof points, that we want to be bringing the proof points. We don't want to be talking about things. We want to be proving things. And we think about it in three ways. You know, what are the proof points for technology? I gave you the example we're going to do on the 15th, where all the logistics we're pulling together to get hydrogen there, to actually run a turbine and set it all up. It's really interesting and challenging. So that's a proof point for the technology working. It's a proof point for emerging nations and the role they have to play in being part of the solution, and the leadership that Egypt is showing that we talked about for today and tomorrow, which is the last past COP26. And I think it's a real proof point for partnerships. We'll be involved in scores of events like many others, but not one thing we're doing as General Electric. We're doing every single thing we do at COP27 is with a government, it's with an NGO, it's with other companies, with some of our competitors. And that's just really groundbreaking to be there as a company, but be working with so many diverse entities and working so well with them towards common goals. So this is a significant shift that we want to recognize. We appreciate it. It's happening before our eyes. And I think these are the ways that Egypt's going to have a lasting impression on the COP process in all three ways: the proof points for technology, the proof points for emerging nations, and the proof points for cementing the role of partnerships across groups and sectors.
Well, Roger, I can tell you this: the Atlantic Council Global Energy Center is thrilled to be following this journey along with you, along with GE. We really appreciate your time, and we're excited to see you.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it. And again, thank you for the honor of letting us share our perspective with the Landon Council. We're very appreciative of your leadership here and very happy to support in any way.